Joining me live here on India Today is Colin, the former government faith advisor. He's worked closely with the last 5 prime ministers of the United Kingdom. Colin, a pleasure having you here with us on India Today. We've seen some very unfortunate scenes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Colin. We've seen some very unfortunate scenes coming in from Glasgow right now of our Indian High Commissioner, top Indian diplomat, being garroted, if you may, by seemingly 2 Khalistani supporters. What do you make of that happening in the UK?
Well, it's very concerning, and which is why I have suggested that the British government need to do more to ensure that this kind of activism or extremism is dealt with appropriately. I mean, by way of background, the reason I got involved in this was I wrote a report. It took me the last 4 years to write for the British government on how it engages with different faith communities. We did a call for evidence. We had more than 21,000 responses, and within those responses, a very great deal of them came from within the British Sikh community. And they raised the issue that there were these Sikh extremists and other pro-Khalistan extremists that were making their lives very difficult. And I need to stress that the vast majority of British Sikhs, the overwhelming majority, are amongst the nicest, kindest, most generous and peaceful people you could ever wish to meet.
Yeah.
But there does exist this tiny but very vocal and very aggressive minority that really intimidates and abuses others. And that's what's prompted me to write. Part of the report is focused on that. The majority of the report is about all other faiths. It's not just about this particular issue. But it did prompt me to write that.
Yeah.
And what we saw in Glasgow, I think, was yet another example of how these activists can very quickly escalate into something which is a lot nastier and more unpleasant.
I'm glad you stressed on the fact that this isn't a movement that's hugely supported by the British Sikh population. It's important to put that out there. Having said that, however, Colin, could you stress on how much of a small percentage we're really talking about here? The concern is that, this group feels rather emboldened. How else could they go ahead and garrote a top Indian diplomat in the manner that they did?
Well, I don't have an answer as to exactly how big they are. I mean, the British Sikh community is not, it's not as big as the Sikh community is in Canada, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's still relatively small. They are still a much loved and, a wonderful part of the tapestry that is the United Kingdom's different ethnic and diaspora groups that we have. And we love them very much. But they are still relatively very small. Within that, there does exist, possibly just a few hundred. I mean, I don't think it's much more than that. People who have become much more emboldened in recent years to fight for what they see as an independent Sikh state called Khalistan. Now, look, for the record, I have no problem with people believing whatever they want to believe. They're free to argue for whatever they want, to raise money for whatever they want. We live in a free country. They can do that. But what they can't do is intimidate and oppress others. They certainly can't use violence. And it would be inappropriate for them to say that, all Sikhs must believe in what they believe. But they are increasingly making it a condition of the Sikh faith that they have to have this independent Sikh state called Khalistan. And if they step outside of that, if any British Sikh was to argue against them, then the evidence that I've received and the evidence gathering that I've done would indicate that for many people, they feel very coerced, very intimidated by this small but very aggressive group of people. And that's not right. That shouldn't happen in the UK. Now, what happened to the Indian High Commissioner, I think, was just another example of where a local gurudwara, put on a reception for the High Commissioner, and these activists turned up and intimidated the management of the gurudwara, and then tried to harass the High Commissioner, and sadly he had to leave. Now, again, that is totally inappropriate and should not happen in the United Kingdom. And I feel very, very sorry for the majority of British Sikhs who I'm sure would have loved to have had the High Commissioner at the Gurdwara, and also to the High Commissioner. And I think he deserves an apology.
With what's happened with the Indian diplomat, with the High Commissioner, and you see what happened in March when the Indian High Commissioner was also targeted by these Khalistani elements and they pulled down the Indian tricolour. Do you believe, Colin, that the UK government is really doing enough to counter this problem?
I think they could do more. I would say that in the last few years, since I began my investigation, since I started writing my report, I am pleased to say that, they'd gone from having very, very little, if no interest in this subject, to a much higher level of interest. So I think we've seen a step up from different elements within the British establishment to address this pro-Khalistan extremist behaviour. But I think what's evident from what's happened in the last few days is that they need to do more. And I would be, I'm worried because I'm old enough to remember when General Bra came to London and sadly was attacked and had his throat cut by pro-Khalistan terrorists. Now those people were caught and they went to prison. They've now been subsequently released. They served their time. But there are going to be crazy elements within any community that might see that, doing these kind of things is acceptable or is the right thing to do. And so I do think that the High Commissioner and others will probably need to have some level of protection whilst they are here in the United Kingdom, because we just don't know, what is going to happen next. Can you imagine, just for a moment, imagine that some tragedy had happened? It would be an international incident and would cause enormous pain and humiliation, not just to our country, but also to India. So it's important that we protect our diplomats who are here as our guests and ensure that they are kept safe.
In light of what you said, that, you believe there's more that needs to be done. Why is it that that's not happening? Do you believe that it's a lack of political will, like what we're seeing in Canada? Or is it that there's a lack of recognition of the problem, of the threat?
I think some of it is still about not fully understanding just how serious this issue is. So I said earlier that I think that the British government have improved their understanding. I still think there is more work. There is more work to do. I don't think that the problem is. I think the problem is larger than the British government think it is going to be. Next year, of course, is the 40th anniversary of the Operation Blue Star. I think that is going to create, a lot more activity for the British, for the establishment to have to deal with, for the police and others to deal with, because I think tensions will be a lot higher, and I think people's emotions will be running very, very high. And people are free to protest. I'm quite happy and relaxed that people believe whatever they want and they can protest about whatever they want. I believe in free speech. But when it flips into violence, when it flips into intimidation, then I think we have a problem and we have to address it.
You've sounded off a real, very real threat and a real warning to the UK administration to act now. Would you sound off a similar warning also to Canada in lieu of all that's happened in the last few weeks, Colin?
I'm not. I mean, I don't really have any remit to discuss Canada. I don't speak on behalf of the British government. I certainly don't speak on behalf of the Canadian government. I have no idea the truth or otherwise of what happened in Canada.
Keeping aside, the killing of Nijjar.
I do think I would just. But I would just say that I think that the comments that Justin Trudeau has made has become subsequently a lot more diluted over the last few days.
Correct.
And he started talking with a great deal of certainty, and now he's talking with a little less certainty about exactly the nature of the death of the individual concerned.
All right. Interesting perspective. Thank you very much, Colin, for joining us. With your expert take, it's been very, very also knowledgeable speaking to you. So thank you very much for getting us all of those details and your view on what's really happening in the United Kingdom. Is the Khalistani threat real or not on foreign soil on the United Kingdom? You heard there from the expert, from Colin Blue.